A couple days ago, the demo for Fire Emblem Three Hopes, the second Warriors spin-off in the series, dropped seemingly out of the blue, and while I've been rather silent and kind of unenthusiastic about the game, I figured that instead of being blindly unenthusiastic and hypocritically critical, I'd play the demo so that I can have a bit of an informed opinion, but also, honestly, so that you don't have to play the demo, and you can just watch this video and maybe have a tiny bit of an opinion on the game. So let's talk about it. Before I sink my teeth into the real meaty bits though, I'd like to talk about one aspect of the game that is overwhelmingly positive, and that's the music. There are a fair few remixes of old Three Houses bangers that I actually really liked, and don't think I've found myself actively disliking or being turned off by a piece of music throughout the 3.5 hours or so I spent playing the demo. If you've played Three Houses, which I hope you have, you'll also realize that the visuals of that game and this game, as well as the character models and some of the portraits and some of the animations, are pretty much identical. Koei Tecmo, for those of you who don't know, worked on Three Houses quite a bit, and so it's only natural that certain assets are reused. But graphically, you can kind of expect this game to do a lot of what Three Houses did in terms of cutscene quality, art, voice acting, and stuff like that. However, one thing that I find quite odd was how different the game felt to control. There are portions in this game where you run around your base camp, kind of like Three Houses with Garrick Mach, and when you do that, you are set to walk by default, which is extremely slow. It says you can hit B to toggle the run option or something like that, but every time I do that, then stop to talk to a character or do an activity, it goes back to the default walk option. Maybe I'm just stupid, which is very possible, and I didn't find the setting to make it permanent, but this is incredibly frustrating, and I hope they fix that in the base game. It's kind of offset by the fact that you can fast travel, but if you're still trying to go around your base camp and talk to everyone and find all the little books and the secrets that they have in there, it's very, very annoying. Movement in general just feels quite clunky in this game, even inside the combat segments. It's kind of hard to describe, and I don't remember Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity feeling like this, but while you're on the combat maps, it feels like your character only has the old school 8 directions you're allowed to move in, instead of being adaptable to the way you move your analog stick in sort of a 360 degrees kind of motion. So I found it rather annoying to control and had my character taking a lot of sharp turns into angles I didn't really want to move in. That's my only real gripe with how the controls feel. Outside of that, it actually has a lot of different setting options that you can play around with before you start to let you customize your own playstyle, and it even lets you remap your buttons, which is always a huge plus. Now, let's get into the juicy bits that you're probably waiting to hear about. I'll start it off with what I think of the story so far and the demo. Our main character's name is Shez, or Shay, or you get to rename your character so it doesn't really matter, and they're a random mercenary who appears out of the blue with the voice of a god in their head and finds themselves thrust into a situation where they're saving the 3 main lords from bandits. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it does, because what do you know, that's exactly what happens in Three Houses. This time, however, the voice of the god in our head isn't Sothis, and we're actually fighting against Byleth, who seems to be operating with the bandits and attacking us. We eventually save the lords and get invited to their base camp, where they forcefully recruit us to join the school as a student, this time instead of a teacher, in one of the 3 houses. I say forcefully because I tried to turn it down and the game told me it wasn't really a good idea and I wasn't allowed to do so, and I have to go to school and graduate and get a degree, and it's giving me PTSD of my time with my family back in the day, so I don't even know where I was going with that train of thought. But anyways, I wasn't allowed to say no, so there you go. At least that's one thing this game keeps consistent. Your choices still don't really matter. The classic Fire Emblem gambit, if you will. Anyways, you get to choose a house to side with. Naturally, I chose the Black Eagles because, let's be real, Edelgard did nothing wrong, and off we went. I'm going to pause here for a moment because this is where I tell you that the story of this game is all over the place. We started off saving the lords from bandits, which is fairly familiar, but then they tell you they're looking for a Meyer village, which I don't remember being that early in the story. And if anyone remembers in Three Houses, it's the place where we originally fight Solon. Then, all of a sudden, no one cares about Remire, we get no closure about any of that, and we're back at the monastery and being sent on a mission to chase down the same bandits in an old abandoned castle. I only played the Black Eagles route of this demo, and let's be real, that's kind of all you need to do. But this seems to be where things start to split off, which is a bonus. For Edelgard, you recruit Monica here, who is trapped away in a cell at the basement of this castle with the bandits or the thieves in it, and she doesn't get killed in this game and taken over by Kronia, because at the end of this map, you actually fight and drive away Kronia, and you also fight a big divine beast. After that, Monica ends up exposing Tomas as Solon after the battle, and he flees from the monastery when he's confronted. Then, very quickly, we fast forward to Edelgard going home to Enbar. She exposes Arundel and Talus, or Arundel as Talus, and fights him as well as his conspirator, Duke von Eyre, while taking control of the Empire as its new ruler. If it seems like I was jumping across timelines here, that's because I am. The story pacing of the early game is really fast, and it presumes that you've played through the first half of Three Houses at least once in order to cover a lot of the details that they have completely just cut out of the game. Though, one bonus of this is that, unlike the base game in Three Houses, you don't have to play through half the game to wait for the post-time skip to start and notice the differences in the story. Once you choose your house, the route split is immediately apparent and you go off into that branching path. Now, like I said, the story is all over the place right now, but where it stops is that right after Edelgard is crowned, she decides to invade the monastery after sitting down and taking a 2-year quote-unquote break in Adrestia. She's gathered her forces, restored the Southern Church, restructured her allies, and in the main game, we don't really see this. Edelgard just immediately marches on the capital before the time skip and takes it over instead. Here, it's safe to assume that at this point, this is an entirely new story that is alternate to the main game, and I don't think we can compare the two or even call it a branching route at all. I think the game needs to be looked at as some kind of multiverse or alternate universe where the entire story is basically being rewritten. My gut feeling is that this can go one of two ways. Either Three Hopes will be a story that focuses on what happened during the time skip, and then eventually reunites with the main timeline after killing our main character off, or it'll flesh out the time skip, have 3 totally new stories, establish Byleth as a villain, and have nothing to do with the main game. If you're asking me what's more likely, I think it's the latter, because it's so much easier to just ignore integration with the main game and write something completely new, rather than to try to retcon and align it with the original timeline while filling in the blanks. I am honestly very hesitant about whether or not to think this is a good thing. On the one hand, the original story had a lot of blanks that needed to be filled and a lot of filler that could have been removed, but if the pacing of this game continues to be like it has been so far in the demo, this is just a catastrophic shit show of a story that is waiting to happen. At the moment, it's offering absolutely no time for the story and characters to really get established and settle in place. They kind of just pop in, say something, pop out. Like Monica, just like she didn't really have any introduction. She was just kind of, oh, we know this student. She was a student at the monastery last year. She exposes Solon immediately because he kidnapped her, and then she's not relevant in the chapter afterwards at all. Personally, I'm a huge stickler for story and character development, so before I go too deep into hypothesizing about the unknown like I kind of just did at the end of that last ramble, I'm just going to move on to the gameplay portion of this video. The gameplay in this game is split up into 2 segments, I guess you can say. The first is the combat, and if you've ever played a Warriors game, then it's basically your standard Warriors gameplay. You have hordes upon hordes of non-threatening generic enemies that exist to basically sandbag. Every now and then, there are base points that you can capture by defeating a captain, or bosses that you need to defeat in order to conquer an area or fulfill a certain objective. It's fairly standard, and I think that this is what they do in every Warriors game. The only thing that changed is that this has a Fire Emblem twist on it. It uses Three Houses characters, Three Houses skills, Three Houses weapons and combat arts, Three Houses critical cut-ins, you get the point. You run around the map fulfilling whatever objective is on the screen at that point, and there are chests and little side missions that pop up, but they're all within the context of you run around the map and you kill that target unit, or whatever it is. I guess you can also guide your allies to attack different parts of the map automatically so that you can divide and conquer, but I'm just going to say it up front, I really don't like Warriors gameplay. That's just my own personal take. I'm not a fan of mindless hack and slash games where you just spam your buttons, watch big numbers, and see things die on screen. But if you do like that kind of thing, then all the power to you. It's just not my taste. Three Hopes also does try to take inspiration by sprinkling in some Three Houses elements like the weapon triangle and permadeath and things like that, but at its core, the gameplay is Warriors through and through, and in order to enjoy this game, you're going to need to like that, or at least be able to tolerate it. The second portion of the gameplay aspect is the time you're going to spend in the base camp or camp area of your army. Remember those ridiculously annoying, stretched out portions of Three Houses you spent in Garrick Mach Monastery leveling your units and doing chores and side quests and finding lost items? Well, it's back, but this time you have a much smaller base camp and you're spending a lot less time here, at least for now. Everything here is the exact same as it was in Three Houses. You have your food area for supports, you have the training area to level up your weapon ranks, you can promote your units, and you can send them out to volunteer and do chores to level up their supports as well. As far as I can tell, there aren't any lost items, side quests, gardening, or any of that stuff, but there does seem to be an implied reference that fishing exists, since you can see something in the shop that hints at that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the base camp is basically Garrick Mach Monastery Light Edition. You can probably expect most of what you did there to show up here, and you enhance and invest your units in pretty much the exact same way. Again, this was my least favorite part about Three Houses, so the fact that they combined this with the gameplay of Warriors doesn't exactly bode well for my assessment of the gameplay portion of Three Hopes. Now, if you've gotten this far and listened to most of what my video has to offer, then you probably know where this is going. At best, I'm intrigued by the potential that the story has in this game, but I don't really find myself enjoying the gameplay at all. Nothing about it feels new or fresh, and it mostly feels like they just mashed together the combat of Warriors with the team management of Three Houses and called it a day. But should you buy the game though? Well, for me, the easy answer is no. I'd probably just end up watching a compilation of all the cutscenes on YouTube somewhere for the story and call it a day instead of forcing myself through tons of gameplay I don't really enjoy. If you're like me, and all you care about is the story, then that's probably all I can recommend to you in good faith. Otherwise, I really don't feel like this is a worthwhile pickup, especially after my Age of Calamity experience. However, if you're a Warriors fan, and a Three Houses fan, and you love the gameplay of both, then this is probably the easiest purchase of your life. That's pretty much all I've got to say about this game. I doubt I'll make another video on it, but fear not. The nice thing about the Fire Emblem community is that we're delusional, and regardless of the product, most people will go crazy about it because it's Fire Emblem. So, you've got a bunch of other people making videos about it and covering the game, and you can refer to them and they all do good work, so you won't be left out to dry. Having said that, I hope you all have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you all in the next video very soon. Peace.